So I've just seen that like 2,000 homes in Melbourne's east will soon be under new rules because of like erosion and landslides, and it's pretty wild, right? So like 1,987 more homes in Melbourne's east, mostly in like the Yarra Ranges, will soon come under these new planning restrictions, and it's part of an updated mapping showing that these homes are now at risk of landslides and a thing called debris flow, which I'll touch on in a minute. But the crazy part is it now brings that total number of affected properties to 13,434. So they did this because there was a big storm back in 2021. It damaged nearly 200 properties in the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria. The council says that the next big landslide could be likely and imminent. So what's causing the erosion? Well, according to a Uni of Melbourne earth sciences expert, Professor Antoinette Tordesillas, erosion's getting worse because of more intense and frequent storms, which are obviously spurred on by climate change, and then like bushfires and logging and land clearing and even off-road driving. So when the soil is exposed or damaged, it becomes way easier for it to wash or slide away when there's heavy rain events. And it's happening in other parts of Victoria as well. At the start of the year, a home was destroyed on the Mornington Peninsula, and it's pretty wild in the state south. So Mount Dandenong in particular is especially vulnerable because it was formed by a volcano around 370 million years ago, and the rock there called rhyodacite, it's a strong rock, but when it gets exposed to the elements, it gets chemically weathered and essentially turns into like a clay. And landslides have been recorded in that area since the 1860s, and the latest was in Ferny Creek back in January of 2024. So this erosion plan, it's called an EMO, an erosion management overlay, is a planning control that applies for land that's at risk of landslips or this other thing called debris flow. Landslip is basically, slower moving soil that can damage a property, and debris flow is fast moving wet soil and rocks that can be dangerous to people. And basically what this EMO means is that you now need a planning permit for a new development to make sure that homes aren't built in stupid places, essentially. Now, you might go, well, why have all these numbers changed? Because they were relying on data essentially from the 90s, and that data from the 90s was actually kind of relying on data from the 60s and like old contour maps and like early, aerial photographs. So it was probably quite overdue for a bit of a refresh, and especially now that you've got stuff like satellite data, AI, geotechnical surveys. So it's much easier to get a more accurate idea of what land could slip away, right? So 3,172 new properties are now vulnerable, but 1,185 properties were actually removed. So it's really interesting to see like how they realize like, old areas are now like, oh, this is actually all right. But then, there's a whole lot of new areas that are like, yeah, no, sorry, your house could slip away, essentially. Tordesillas said that it was time for all authorities to consider how to plan moving forward from the ground up. She said that Indigenous Australians have long practiced a philosophy known as caring for country, which is all about living in balance with the land. And so this is like nurturing the soil, planting and keeping more native vegetation, and making sure that the ground is densely covered and healthy, because when it's stripped bare, that's when it can slip away. And also regular monitoring of the land, because erosion doesn't stand still and climate change isn't at the moment getting any better. So, they need to keep an eye on actually what's going on and maybe not leave it for another 30 odd years.